This is session 5 of project management, and we're going to return to the subject of leadership and see what really matters in terms of leading a project team effectively.
Project Management Session 5. Leading Projects Effectively. In this session, we focus on your performance as a project leader based on the approach of Briner, Geddes and Hastings in their book Project Leadership. In their book Project Leadership, Briner, Geddes and Hastings promote a very interesting idea about the role of the project leader, and we can see this in slide 2. It's helpful to focus on the specific leadership requirements of a project leader and manager, as well as the more generic ones already mentioned earlier in this particular module. Project leaders need to look upwards and keep their sponsors on side to ensure organisational commitment. The project leader needs to look backwards to learn from past experience, monitor progress and make sure mistakes are not repeated. Self-awareness as a leader is important, and the project leader can develop this by looking inwards, reviewing his or her own performance and ensuring that his or her leadership efforts make a positive contribution to the work of the team and the project as a whole. The project leader needs to look downwards to manage the team in such a way that their performance is maximised both individually and as a team. Looking forwards, planning, setting milestones and targets are all important, and that forward vision needs to take account of the short-term, medium-term and long-term issues. Finally, the project leader needs to look outwards, managing the client, end user and external stakeholders to ensure that their expectations are met. And we're going to explore these 6 areas in the next few slides. But before moving on to slide 3, just give some thought to the following study questions. In which of these 6 areas are you most effective? And in which of these 6 areas is there perhaps some room for improvement? In slide 3, we look at the first of these dimensions. How good are you at looking upwards? So, with this dimension, give yourself a mark out of 5 for each of the following statements. 1 is not true, 5 is very true. So, firstly, I have clearly demonstrated to my senior management that I understand the full impact of my project on the organisation. What's your score? Between 1 is not true and 5 is very true. Write it down on a piece of paper. I feel fine. Asking my sponsor for help is number 2. What's your score? Between 1, not true at all, and 5 is very true. Number 3. I help my sponsor to help me by keeping them fully informed. How good are you at this one? Remember, 1 is not true at all, 5 is very true. Number 4. I understand the politics at the top of my organisation. What score would you give on the basis of 1 is not true, 5 is very true? And number 5. I can always get access to senior management when I need to. 1 is not true, 5 is very true. So, total up your scores and write down your total score out of 25. Now, your study question for this slide is this. What actions and steps can you take to improve your ability to look upwards? In slide 4, we look at the second dimension. How good are you at looking backwards as a project manager? So, give yourself a mark out of 5 for each of the following statements. Again, 1 is not true, 5 is very true. Number 1. I've ensured that my project has appropriate mechanisms for measuring progress. So what score would you give that? 1 is not true, 5 is very true. Number 2. We are good at keeping people informed about our progress. 1 is not true, 5 is very true. What score would you give? Number 3. When things go wrong, we are good at taking action to put things right quickly. So what score would you give yourself on that one? 1 is not true, whereas 5 is very true, somewhere in the middle maybe. Number 4. My project team never makes the same mistake twice. Number 4. My project team never makes the same mistake twice. What score would you give that on the basis that 1 is not true, 5 is very true? And then number 5. Team members share with me the responsibility for keeping things on track. Again, 1 is not true, 5 is very true. What score would you give yourself for that element? So total up your scores out of 25. What do you get? Before moving on to the next slide, slide 5, have a thought about the study question. What actions and steps can you take to improve your ability to look backwards? Slide 5. Let's look at the next dimension. How good are you at looking downwards as a project leader and manager? As before, give yourself a mark out of 5 for each of the following statements. 1 is not true, 5 is very true, and obviously there's a range in between. My team members say I am very supportive is our first element. So on a scale of 1 to 5, what score would you give yourself for that? Number 2. I review individual performance and progress with team members regularly. So on a scale of 1 is not true to 5 is very true, where would you place your answer for your ability at looking downwards? Number 3. I put time and effort into our working together as a team. Again, 1 is not true, 5 is very true. Where on that scale of 1 to 5 would you put your ability? Number 4. I'm aware of the personal strengths and areas for development for my individual team members. What score would you give yourself for that on the basis that 1 is not true, 5 is very true, and a scale of numbers in between? And then number 5, I bring the members of my team together regularly. What score would you give yourself for that? 1 is not true, 5 is very true. So, when you've thought about all 5 questions and statements, total up your marks and see what your total score out of 25 is. And then give some thought to the study questions. What actions and steps can you take to improve your ability to look downwards? Slide 7. How good are you at looking forwards? As before, let's explore this dimension. Give yourself a mark out of 5 for each of the following statements on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not very true at all, whereas 5 is very true, and maybe you're scoring somewhere in the middle for each of the items. Number 1. My team and I are very clear about our targets. So would you give that a score of 1, not at all true, or somewhere in the middle, or perhaps at the other end where 5 is very true? Number 2. I don't get caught out by not having enough resources when I need them. Is that true for you? Give yourself a score out of 1 of 5. 1 is not true at all, 5 is very true. Number 3. Team members share with me the responsibility for planning and anticipating events and milestones. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not true and 5 is very true, what score would you give yourself for that particular item? And number 4. I am constantly trying to anticipate the problems that lie over the horizon. What score would you give yourself on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not true, 5 is very true, and there are maybe scores in the middle which might be appropriate for you? Finally, number 5. I am seldom caught out by unforeseen events. What score would you give yourself for that on a scale of 1 to 5? Remember, 1 is not true, 5 is very true, and maybe there's a score in the middle that you would think was appropriate. So, just add up your score for all 5 of those elements and see what your total score out of 25 is. Now your study question. Well, I'm sure you can predict it. What actions and steps can you take to improve your ability to move forwards? And now we move on to slide 9. How good are you at looking inwards? As before, give yourself a mark out of 5 for each of the following statements. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not true, 5 is very true, and obviously the scores in between represent how true you think that is for you. So number 1, I'm honest with myself. What score would you give yourself on the basis of 1 is not true, up the scale to 5 is very true? Number 2, I take active steps to manage my pressure and stress levels. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not true and 5 is very true, what score would you give yourself on that particular item? Number 3, I communicate conviction and confidence about the project to others. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not true, 5 is very true, what score would you give yourself on this conviction and confidence issue? Number 4, I seek regular feedback from others about how to improve my performance as a project leader. So on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not true and 5 is very true, what score would you give yourself on this item? And number 5, I take time out to think how effectively I am managing the project. So on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not true and 5 is very true, what score would you give yourself for this element? So total score up out of 25, and then give some thought to the study question. What actions and steps can you take to improve your ability to look inwards? In slide 9, we simply pull together the scores for these 6 areas. What are your scores for looking backwards, looking downwards, looking outwards, looking forwards, and looking inwards? And then give some thought to the study question, which of these 6 areas is your strongest attribute? Which is your major area for development? So now we move on to the final slide, slide 10 of this particular session, and we call this Putting This All Together. Now, in their book, Project Leadership, Brian Geddes and Hastings actually propose 14 integrative processes which the project leader needs to operate. Firstly, wiring into stakeholders, securing stakeholder agreement, marketing the project, networking, and building credibility. Then there is keeping on the ball, anticipating, seeking feedback, keeping the whole team informed, and continuous planning and review. And then thirdly, focusing on results, creating a supportive culture in the team, being tough on quality, clarifying success criteria, providing purpose and direction, celebrating success, and reflecting on performance. So to finish off this session, just think about the study questions. How effectively do you wire into stakeholders on the above definitions? Are you good at keeping on the ball as above? And how effectively do you focus on results? Well, this is slide 11, the bibliography, and there's just one reference for this session. The book Project Leadership by Brian Geddes and Hastings, which details the approach of the 6 areas upon which the project leader and manager needs to focus. That these 6 areas of looking inwards and outwards and downwards and so on. So have a look at that book once you've got your results and just ponder on how you can move forward as a project leader. That's the end of this session. I look forward to speaking with you in session 6. Thank you.